Another very important aspect of our API is the permissions, including the authentication header and roles. So let's now jump down to the delete items ID endpoint, which is of course an authenticated endpoint, and we're going to document this one now. So we'll begin with the doc block, and we'll add the API parameter on the first line. And the first value for this one will of course be delete for the delete method, and the second value will be /items/:ID for the path. Finally, we're going to add a description, which will be delete an item. Next, we'll add the group for this endpoint, which is going to be @API group, and that will be part of the item group. And we'll add the name, which will be @API name, and this one's going to be delete items ID, like that. Now this endpoint also has a parameter, which this time is the dynamic URL segment for the items ID. So we can define that by going @API param, and it's a string, of course, and the name's ID. And we'll put a description, which will be simply just items ID, like that. Let's now document the authentication aspects of this endpoint. So we'll begin by adding a new API doc param, which is API permission. And this one allows us to specify the user role that can access this resource. Now, since this is only admin users, we can just put admin there, like that. Next, let's document the authentication header, since this endpoint is secured with a JSON web token. So we can document this by using the @API header param. Now the first value for this is the type, which is going to be string, and the second value will be the header name, which will be authorization. Finally, we can provide a description. So let's put users JSON web token prefixed with bearer, like that. Like with the request body, it'd be nice to provide an example of the header. So let's add another line and add the param @API header example. We're then going to follow that with the type of the example, which will again be a JSON example. And we'll put the example title, which will make header example. On the next line, we can create a JSON object for this example header. So we'll provide a property for this, which will be authorization. And for the value, let's put bearer and a colon, bearer and a colon, like that, in a space. It'd be good to include a real JSON web token in the example as well. So I've just come over here to jwt.io, and I've come down to the debugger section, and I'm just going to copy this random example of a JWT that they've got here. And we'll come back to the example, and I'm simply going to paste that in there, like that. Now you'll note that by pasting the token in the example, we've now made the line exceed the character limit imposed by ESLint. So what we're going to have to do is temporarily disable the max len rule, which is the one that is complaining about this. So what we can do is we can go to the top of the doc block, and we can put just a regular comment, and we can go ESLint disable, and then the rule name, which is max-len, like that. And so what that's going to do is disable that rule for the rest of the file. But then we can go to the bottom of the doc block and switch it back on. So we can now go ESLint enable max len, like that. Coming back to the site now, we can see what our delete items ID endpoint looks like now. So you can see we've got the permission indicated there, and we've got the header documented there, and we've got this nice example of a header as well.